Hi, everyone. My name is Akila. I work at the University of Richmond in the Office of Living and Learning Programs. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm here today to do a presentation called Leveraging Your Personality Test. So, the idea for this presentation came from the fact that, in higher ed and student affairs, and even before you're in a professional program as a student leader in undergrad, a lot of times we're given a lot of personality tests, right? And we reflect on our results in the context that we're in, and then we have these results in our arsenal. And so I thought that I would look at three different personality tests that have come up time and time again, and look at how you can use your results and reflect on them in the context of a job interview. So that's where the idea of this presentation came from. So the outcomes that I hope to have in this presentation are to develop a further understanding of what three personality tests can tell you about yourself, and then understand how you can use your results to identify aspects of a job that are important to you, and then reflect on what questions you can ask in a job interview that speak to those aspects. So before we dive deeper, I just want to say that this isn't coming from a career services perspective. I'm not going to really be going too in depth about each test. I'm not going to be talking about what the nitty gritty about each of the tests. It's really more so the results that you already have, and how you can leverage those at your next job interview. So the tests that I'm going to be looking at are StrengthsQuest, so Clifton Strengths, I think it used to be called, Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, so MBTI, and True Colors. And if you have your results for any of these, feel free to follow along. I'll be using my results as kind of an example, but even if you have different tests, maybe you don't have these three, but you have something else, feel free to use some of the reflective questions that I'm going to ask in this, and maybe apply those to the results that you already have. So hopefully either way, this presentation will be helpful to you. So the first test that I'm going to be looking at is StrengthsQuest. And so the premise of StrengthsQuest is just coming from a place of positive psychology, right? So everybody has talents. So there are things that you're naturally good at. And if you invest time, and energy into your existing talents, they can become your strengths, right? And so it's all about working with what you're naturally good at and honing in on the skills that you have and just making them better and better. And they have 34 total themes. And so your top five end up being very unique to you, because of the way that the 34 can rearrange, right? It's very rare that two people have the same exact top five in the same exact order. So this is a great tool. And for me, I've always kind of viewed StrengthsQuest as I'm answering the questions of, again, in terms of a job, what do I add to the role and what do I need personally in order to thrive in this role that I'm interviewing for, right? So strengths are so personal to you. They're really what you bring to the table and what you value the most. And so these are the questions that I believe this test answers. So when you're reflecting on your results, you want to ask yourself, how do my top five strengths connect with each other? I think that's important to see the interaction between the top five. What do they say about what I bring to the table, and what will I need in a job environment so that my strengths shine? So really taking the time to reflect on your top five strengths, to think about how are they going to show up in a ideal job situation, or even if you have the job description of the role that you're interviewing for in front of you, doing this reflection can allow you to look at the job description and then later at the interview ask the questions to see, like, oh, okay, you know here's an environment where I can do this, and then maybe it'll even show you, oh, like, my one strength isn't going to shine as much. So let me give you an example. So these are my top five strengths: empathy, developer, input, connectedness, and intellection. So if you've taken the StrengthsQuest test before, you know that they give you like a guide that explains each of these in relation to how, like, specifically for you, right? So they give you a top five guide. So definitely use that when you're reflecting. But even just by looking at these five strengths, um, thinking about how they interact with each other, right? And so the first two things that popped out to me when I was looking at this and looking at my descriptions were empathy and connectedness, right? So to me, those are related. So empathy is all about being aware of people's needs and their, like, thoughts and their feelings, right? And being aware of them, and then also connecting them to people that might help them. So for me, like, that's how I use my empathy. And then the way it relates to connectedness is that, if you have connectedness in your top five or even as a strength at all, you have a strong belief that things happen for a reason. Everyone is connected. Nobody comes into your life without a purpose, all of those things, right? So when I look at these two things in the context of higher education and student affairs, for me, that means as a professional, I need student interaction beyond just managing a program, right? Like I need it, like I want to be right there with the students every day. I need that constant student interaction so that I'm able to connect people that might not be connected before, so that I can see like, oh, so and so likes this, and so does this other person. And so that brings me a lot of fulfillment to know that I can be kind of a facilitator of relationships, as weird as that sounds, just to connect students and allow for like connection across difference is something that's really important to me. Um, and then the second piece is developer by itself, right? So developer basically means that you see the potential in someone and you want to nurture that potential and help them grow. Obviously, that's so applicable to higher education and student affairs. And for it being my second strength, I know that this is deeply important to me. And the way it can show up in a job environment is, again, I need student interaction in a way that will allow me to see students grow. So I can't have a role where I'm only seeing students one time for one program and then they're out of my door, right? That isn't going to fly with me. So upon looking at these strengths and how they interact, like I need to be able to develop students. And going back to the connectedness piece, as students are growing, that just gives me more of an opportunity to connect them with other people and to connect them with other opportunities, right? So that's what developer says to me. And then finally, input and intellection to me are related. Input is basically gathering information. Intellection is all about like intellectual activity, thinking about things, thinking deeply about things. So the way this translates when I'm thinking about a job is, will I have time to retreat and actually process the information that I'm being given? Will I be able to bring ideas to the table? One thing that I know I value is that an environment that facilitates a lot of brainstorming. I would want an environment that will give me the freedom to come to the table with an idea that maybe I researched, maybe I gained best practices from different institutions and I want to bring it to the table to be like, hey, maybe we should do this, and have that idea be accepted and seen. And even if we don't implement it, for me to be comfortable enough to bring that to the table. So to me, though, that's what input and intellection tell me about what I need in a job, right? So altogether, I need student interaction more than just managing a program. I need students, I need to be in a role that will help student growth, like in a way where I can actually see the growth happening and I can be there to facilitate that growth. And then I need a job environment where big ideas aren't, no one's scared of big ideas, they're accepted, and that no idea is stupid, right? Like, for lack of a better word, like I want to be in a role where my ideas are seen and valid, and even if they're not implemented, that they're heard. So that's what I got from my top five, and hopefully this helps you as you're looking at your top five to think about how are they interacting with each other. So given these given all of this, these are the questions that I would ask professionals, right? What does a day in the life of this role look like? How often does this role engage with students? I think the day in the life question will kind of get that second piece by itself. If the person says like that you only see students ever so often, that's telling, right? How do you all as a team brainstorm in the office? That's something to ask. And this third one is super important, and it's something that you can ask a future supervisor is, can you tell me about how you have supported the professional development of the person who was in this role before me, or someone that you've supervised in the past, if this is a person who's new to the supervisory role, right? So this is super important for me personally, because again, I have that developer in my top five, but also I think this is a great question to ask regardless of what your personality test results are, because you're going into these roles to grow as professionals, and so you want to be in an environment that fosters that. So, and then the second piece is the questions that you can ask students. So before I go over this, just as unsolicited advice, if there's a student on your phone interview or even in the first beginning stages, make sure that you ask a question for that specific student. Like it can be as simple, this second question that I listed here, what is one thing you like about this university or this office and one thing that you want to change? That's a question that I always kind of have in my pocket. And I always ask the student a question. So definitely do that. I think that it speaks to the field, and also it's just nice to acknowledge the fact that the student is there and they're taking time out of their day, and you will eventually be working with them when you get the job, right, speaking it into existence. So definitely make sure that you connect with them. But anyways, going back to the strength stuff, so what do you all need from the person in this role, professionally and personally? What the university, what do you like and dislike question? And then this third question is also fun. If you were in charge of whatever, if it's an orientation office, if you were in charge of orientation, if it's housing, if you were in charge of this residence hall and could do anything, what would you implement tomorrow? This is a good question to ask, again, to think about, like, what are the big ideas that students have? And if your student interview is early on in the day, like if you are in an on-campus setting and the student interview is in the beginning of the day, this can be a good way for you to think about or get information about what are the students on campus thinking about and what do they want to see changed. And if it's something that you've worked on before, if it's something that you've implemented in a previous role, or even when you're in a grad assistantship role, that can give you leverage later on in the interview. So these are the questions that I came up with based on, again, my analysis of my strengths. But given that everyone's strengths are different, these questions might look a little different for you, but definitely at the end of the day, just think about what questions can you ask to get at the things that you want from the job that will personally fulfill you. So the next test that I'm going to go into is the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, or MBTI. So this was created by Isabel Briggs Myers and Catherine Briggs, and it was a way to simplify Carl Jung's psychological types. So there are 16 personality types that you can get when you take the MBTI, and there are 4 temperaments that I will go over later. The official test for MBTI you have to pay to take, but I know that there are a lot of free ones online. I know that the 16 personalities test is pretty popular. Like if you just Google 16 personalities, that is like a test that I've seen a lot of people take. So just throwing that out there. And to me, so when I was first introduced to MBTI, it was actually when I was an orientation advisor at my undergraduate institution. So for me, I've always seen MBTI as a good test to use to think about how you work on teams and how you show up on teams. So to me, MBTI answers the question, how do I work with others and how do I show up on a team? And so when you're looking at your results, you want to ask yourself, how do I show up in a team setting based on my MBTI? What do I need from others in a team setting, in a job environment? So thinking about if you're going into a office or if you're interviewing for a role where you know you're going to be working with others, thinking about, okay, what kind of team dynamic do I thrive in? And also thinking about what kind of team dynamic should I shy away from, or maybe that is more challenging for me, right? So I'm an ENFP, and what that means is that I'm an extroverted. So that means that I get my energy from other people. So if you're introverted, that just means that you get your energy from yourself. So when you're thinking about a job, if you're extroverted, am I going to be interacting with a lot of people on a day-to-day basis, or is it very much like a you're in your office doing your own thing kind of role? Conversely, if you're introverted, think about if you're going into an office with a lot of people, are there avenues for you to leave the space to recharge? Can you take a walk? Like, is it frowned upon if you're not in the office all the time? These are things that you can start to reflect on based on your results. So the N is intuitive, and if you have an S here, that means that you're sensing. So intuitive just means that you think more big picture, right? And then sensing is more so that you are detail oriented. I think a metaphor that people often use is that, you know, if you're an N, you're the forest, and if you're the S, you're looking at the trees. Both are needed, right, to make a team work. And so again, for me, I'm a very big picture person. And so I think that kind of connects back to my other stuff about, you know, I value brainstorming, I value big ideas. And so that kind of came up again here too, right? So just keeping that in mind. And then F is for feelings. And then if you have a T here, that's for thinking. And this is basically just like your gut reaction. It just means like when you're making a decision, do you, like, the simplified way to say it is like, do you follow your head or your heart? Or like, do you know, do things based on rational, like, decisions or not? This one I do like to say just because you have an F doesn't mean that you can't be rational, and just because you have a T doesn't mean that you can't have feelings. I don't think that they're so rigid. Um, but it's just something to think about too. Like if you're going into an environment, like are the people in the job, like are they very much task oriented and not really thinking about the impact it has on others? Um, is that something that you can bring to the table, or vice versa? If there's people who, if you're going into an environment that it has a lot of great ideas but maybe needs a little bit more structure and rigidity, maybe that's something that you can bring. So when you're looking at your results, not only are you thinking about what you bring to the table, um, you're also thinking about what does the environment already have, and sometimes those things can be different, because if everybody already is, super organized, like you're not, you can say like I'm also organized, but if you have something else that you're bringing that the team that already exists doesn't have, then that's also going to be powerful, right? I hope that made sense. And then the P is for perceiving. So that just means that I'm very, like, P's are very go with the flow. Whereas if you have a J here, then that means that you are, it's called judging, but it doesn't mean that you're a judgmental person. It just means that you value closure and you appreciate like to-do lists, you appreciate a plan. So that's just something to think of too when you're thinking about what are you bringing to the table. Like if you are working for a lot of people who have J, like maybe you're bringing the flexibility, you're bringing the, okay, what's another way of doing this? Versus if you are a J going into an environment where there's a lot of P's, maybe you're the one bringing the structure. Like, okay, here are all these ideas, but let me make it into a structure that everyone can follow. So again, thinking about all of these things in terms of a team and what you're going to bring to it. And then as far as the temperaments go, so there are 4 temperaments. So there's NF, which is what I highlighted here, and there's NT, SP, and SJ. So if you are an NF, this is very like broad strokes. NFs focus on ideas and possibilities, especially that of people, and they value vulnerability and empathy. I've seen NFs be described as idealists, and so if you're an NF, maybe you resonate with that. If you're the other types, like definitely look up what those temperaments mean, because that can also give you just further insight into your type. But so again, when working with others, NFs tend to seek harmony, they want to develop others, and they avoid conflict. And so this is something to think about when you're working for a team, right? So given all of this information, knowing yourself and knowing how you show up on a team is so important, because not only can you think of what do you need from others, but also what you're going to bring to the table. So these are the questions that I would ask based on all of that. So how do you all celebrate successes in the office? To me, I need, again, ENFP, like I value when people come together and when the environment is a happy one, or like just one where I can tell that everyone genuinely like enjoys being there. Like I think that's really important for me. And so I would want to ask, how do you all celebrate successes? What are your favorite office traditions? Is another question that I've asked before. Can you tell me about a time when something went wrong within the office and how did you handle that situation? This is a great question to see, how the team operates when things don't go the way that they planned. Um, what do you all like about coming to work every day? That's another thing that I like to ask, because again, for me, I thrive in team situations or team environments where everyone has a shared vision and we're all working towards this like perfect ideal. I really thrive in those environments, and so I like to ask where everyone's head is at. What do you like about coming to work every day? It's so easy to get caught up in the day-to-day stuff. Again, how do you address conflict within the team? And then again, the last question, what are some short-term and long-term goals that you all are working towards? This is a great question to ask regardless of what your Myers-Briggs is. But it's a good way to gauge, again, what is everybody's role in the team and how are they using it to work towards a common shared vision? And again, questions to ask students that are also related to team building. How do you provide feedback to someone in this role? This is actually something you could ask the supervisor or the professional staff too. I should have put it in the previous slide. How do you provide feedback to someone in this role? How do you all like to receive feedback from someone in this role? This is a good way to gauge how the students see your role. Maybe you're entering a space where students are like, we don't give professional staff feedback. And maybe that's something that you can change when you go there, right? It's so important to have that two-way communication. Again, the conflict question, what's your favorite tradition? Another way to kind of see how people work together as teams. But yeah, the feedback question should actually be on this slide too. So I apologize for that, but definitely ask that to the professional staff as well, because, and especially your supervisor, ask how they give feedback and also how they would like to receive feedback. And if that is met with pushback that you can't give feedback to your supervisor, that's something that you want to think about. Is that a good environment for you to be in? So the last test that I'm going to look at is true colors. And so there are 4 colors that you can get. We all have all of the colors within us. So these are the 4 that are listed in this little picture here. And you can see the descriptors underneath. And so when you take this test, if you've taken it before, you'll know that you're given the 4 colors in a specific order, and that order matters. And so you move from your primary color to your 4th color based on this is when you're at your best. And then as you move towards your last color, it's like the more and more stressed you are, the more you start displaying the like dark side of your last color. Each color has good and bad in them. And so depending on where it is in your spectrum, you're going to display either the positive or negative attributes associated with that color. So to me, true colors, again, answers the question, what do I look like when I'm at my best? Excuse me. And then how do I feel when I'm at my last color? And what do I look like when I, need support? What do I need from others? And so when you're looking at your results, you want to ask yourself, what does my spectrum tell me about how I show up when I'm stressed? And what does it tell me about what I need from others when I'm here, like in the last color area? So, this is supposed to say true colors, my bad, typo. Um, so this is going to tell you, what does my spectrum tell me about how I show up when I'm stressed? And then what does it tell me about what I need from others when I'm here? Um, so this is my true color spectrum. And so when you look, I go from blue to orange to gold to green. And so what that means, I always try to explain it as if I'm planning an event, right? So let's say, I'm planning an event and I have 5 days left. And so the first thing I do, if I'm planning an event that's 5 days away, the first step in my, you know, things that I do is that I try to take the input of everyone that's going to be affected by this event, right? So I try to take in everyone's ideas. I want to make sure that everyone's ideas are heard and validated. I want to make sure that I'm talking to the people that this event is for, to make sure that it's something that they're going to be happy with and something that's going to speak to what they wanted. And then as I get closer to the event, I start going from blue to orange. And what that means is I'm like, okay, I need to get stuff done. I can't just keep asking people for their opinions and make everybody happy. I just need to take action. So orange is all about taking action and just full speed ahead. So, let's say there's like 3 days left to the event. I'm going to go from blue to orange and be like, I need to do things. I can't really worry about what anybody else has to say. I got to do it. And then I get closer. It's 2 days away. The event is 2 days away. I stress out and I start making a lot of lists. So this is when I go from orange to gold. And, if someone has gold and they're positive, like are in their first or second colors, golds are usually super organized. They're very good at planning, but because it's towards the end of my spectrum, I only make a lot of lists. And honestly, sometimes they're useless. Like I make lists of lists of lists in order to feel like I have some control over what's going on. And when in reality, I feel like things are going out of control. So hopefully that makes sense. And then, if it's a day before the event and I still haven't had anything, like I'm still not finished planning it or there's something that's going wrong, I go from gold to green. And green is all about questioning systems and questioning, why things are the way they are. But because it's my last color, I just start questioning, like, what's the point? Like, why am I even doing this? So I always tell people, when you start seeing me either making a bunch of lists, like, and putting them on the wall and like trying to connect everything and making, when you see me like that, or when you see me starting to question why I'm even doing my job, that's when you know that I'm really stressed. So when you're going through your true colors, just look and see, think about a time when you've had to plan an event or like plan a party or plan something big, and think about when that hasn't gone well. Do you find yourself going through these steps? And think about what you look like in your last like color, right? Usually, I'd like to say I'm a very personable person. I like people. I like talking to people. But when I'm in my last color, I don't talk to anybody. I just think that nothing matters and nothing I do is going to fix anything. So I'm in that headspace. Um, so the questions that I would want to ask is, how do you all support one another? How do you all decompress as an office? And what does work-life balance look like for each of you? And so these are questions that you want to ask, or that I would want to ask, because it speaks to how the team supports each other. It speaks to what the work environment is like. If they are a very much we need to be productive all the time kind of office, or if they value work-life balance. Another question that is not on here, but what you can ask is, how do you all have fun as an office? Like, how do you all, I think the question before of how do you celebrate the wins that the office has might also speak to this, where you can kind of see like how the people that you might be working with are going to decompress and how they're going to implement self-care, which is super important. So, um, that's what I have for you all. I hope that this was helpful in any kind of way. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me, and I'll just leave you with one last thing, and that is that, you know, the job search process, and especially now with coronavirus happening, it can be a very daunting process. But I just want you all to remember that you all are bringing so much to the table. So get I would encourage you to get out of thinking like, is this university or is this place the right fit for me? And think more about what am I going to add to this place and what is this place going to give me as a professional? So it is really a give and take. And I truly believe that as much as you're interviewing for a job, like, or as much as they're interviewing you for a job, you are also interviewing them. And so stand in your power in that and know that you are bringing so much to the table. And it's okay if you go to a job interview and you're really not feeling it. Like, that's completely fine. You're allowed to question, you're allowed to ask further questions, clarifying questions, and make sure that it's an environment where you'll thrive. And if I can help in any way, I have a bunch of things from when I was doing job searches from grad school, where there's lists of questions that you can ask interviewers and also questions that they might ask you so that you can practice. If you want any of those resources, if you want someone to look at your materials for you, a third person, I'm completely available and I would love to do it. Let me know if I can help in any way. And thank you for tuning in. And I apologize for any technical difficulties. Bye, y'all.